I would like to get the game Overwatch. What is Overwatch? Overwatch is an online 6v6 team-based first-person shooter. This is a paragraph you probably hope you would never hear. Your son asking for an FPS. But I am. First, Overwatch. Overwatch is, as I said, an online first-person shooter with a variety of characters and maps. A typical game goes like this. You will be put in a team with 5 other people and given your objective. These range from capturing or defending points to moving or stopping payloads. You select a character from a cast of 28 unique heroes. These heroes fall into 4 categories: offense, defense, tank, and support. Then you will need to work with your team to finish your objective. Why do people say you should do sports? Because they're good for you. So I should show you that online first-person shooters are good. Do playing video games help? Yes. Yes, they do. A study by NIH came to the conclusion that people who play fast-paced action games have significantly reduced reaction times than those who didn't. That means nothing if you aren't accurate, though. So, are esports players trigger-happy or incredibly skilled? That was skill. That was accuracy. The study found no speed-accuracy trade-off. Another essential skill of Overwatch is teamwork. You must work with your team to coordinate, and if you go solo, your entire team will fail. Society likes to think of gamers as social hermits, closed off from the real world. But the opposite is true. A study by North Carolina State University found that games don't take away from social lives but augment them. They found that gamers are more likely to rate family and friends as higher priorities than monetary gain. Gaming also helps with hand-eye coordination. In 2014, a study approved by the University of Heidelberg, Germany, took 152 healthy 14-year-olds, 63 who play 14 hours a week. They did brain scans before and after and found that the cortical thickness significantly grown in the ones playing 14 hours a day. We know that the cortical thickness has a positive relationship with hand-eye coordination. But the fact is, none of that matters. Your opinion hasn't changed once. You made up your mind the instant you heard the phrase first-person shooter. After all, you have a solid piece of evidence that mitigates all other evidence. Video games seduce the innocent. Video games make people violent. This is the part where you roll your eyes thinking the famous words, but science shows this. Science shows that video games make people violent. Of course, people always say that somebody proved this or that. So I made sure to follow the studies and that they were reliable and not people throwing together pieces of data to make a headline. Here's what the data says. Are you ready? The answer might surprise you. Violent video games don't make people violent. A University of York study came to this conclusion. They found that a world can be realistic in multiple ways. They had 2 groups play modified versions of a game. One version used ragdoll physics, where the models are rigged on realistic skeletons, making the animations incredibly realistic. The other did not have these types of physics. After playing the games, both groups completed word fragment completion puzzles. The researchers were surprised to find that the players who played the game with ragdoll physics did not have more aggressive answers. In a similar, they had players play a war game where one, the soldiers acted in realistic behaviors, and the other, the soldiers did not act realistically. They then did the same test and had the same result. I understand that data can be twisted and tests can be run biasedly or just wrong. So I made sure the study had a good participant size of 3,000 people and disregarded studies that didn't specify details like the number of participants or were poorly done. That isn't all my evidence, though. The American Psychology Association did a massive analysis on scientific literature in the past decade and a half on this topic and concluded that there was not sufficient data to say that violent video games increase delinquency or other violent actions. Molecular psychiatry did a study. They took a good 90 people with little to no video game exposure and split them into 3 groups. There was a passive control group, which over the next 2 months would not play video games. There's an active control group that played Sims 3, a non-violent video game, and finally there was a group that played GTA 5, a violent video game. Both groups that played games were instructed to play 30 minutes or more every day. They did baseline tests, training session tests after 2 months, and then another test after another 2 months. They used Bruce-Perry Aggression Questionnaire, the State Hostility Scale, the Moral Disengagement Scale, Rosen-Weig Picture Frustration Test, and the Worldview Measure. All of these tests have been used in similar studies. They also use Word Completion Task, a Lexical Decision Task, and Delay Frustration Task to reduce the variable of impulsivity and boredom. They use Brief Sensation Scale and the Boredom Propensity Scale. They tested risk-taking and hesitation using the Balloon Analog Risk Task and Delay Discounting Task. They measured pro-social behavior with Interpersonal Reactivity Index and the Balanced Emotional Empathy Scale, Interpersonal Competence Questionnaire, Richardson Conflict Response Questionnaire, and Reading the Mind in the Eyes test. For determining depression and anxiety, another common myth, they use Beck Depression Inventory and State Trait Anxiety Inventory. To measure executive control function, they use Stop Signal Task, Multi-Source Interference Task, and Task Switching Tasks. They had 52 outcomes within 4 tests, being GTA versus Sims, GTA versus Passive, crossed with the baseline versus post-test 1, and baseline versus post-test 2, leaving us with 208 tests total. Now you might see a problem. You shouldn't test too many things at once. It leads to inflation in statistics. This many tests has a 5% alpha value. This means that about 10 tests will appear significant despite not actually being significant. So in their quest to be accurate, they use Bonferroni correction. So this means you disregard anything under the critical range found by dividing alpha by the number of tests. Now, molecular psychiatry knew that a lot of scientists regard Bonferroni correction to be very conservative, and that could go the wrong way when trying to prove that something doesn't have correlation. So they conducted the false discovery rate. The false discovery rate was a low enough probability to not worry about, so they continued on. Finally, they put data in the Bayesian framework. This allowed them to compare the data to the hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis that violent video games make people violent. The paper concluded, quote, "We did not find relevant negative effects in response to violent video game playing." For more evidence, there are 2 game theories on this topic that I would recommend you watching. I can provide you with all the studies if you would like to do more research. Now, I doubt you'll change your mind. Humans, whether they realize it or not, have a tendency to be stubborn and not to listen to facts. So I leave you with this. If media can make me violent and desensitized to violence, don't you think the news will? Overwatch is only $30, by the way.